Welcome to Web Application Development with PHP. These screencasts are meant for people that have some previous programming experience, or at least have learned a little bit of programming on their own. If you haven't, you can try to follow along. You might be able to get something out of it, but if not, maybe look for another course that will teach you some of the basics in programming. I'll cover everything in programming and talk about it, but it just might move along really fast. So if you haven't programmed in a while, or you haven't programmed at all, you might want to have a little refresher before you dive into this material. Just some tips on watching these screencasts. I would first of all get some software to speed up or slow down the screencast. That way, if you find that it's moving too slow for you, you can speed it up, and if you find that it's moving too fast, you can slow it down. I would also work along with me. Make sure you have a text editor and a web server that you can try things out on. And don't be afraid to pause it and just experiment on your own. You'll get a lot more out of it that way than just watching it alone. So in this lecture, we'll first talk about the difference between a static and a dynamic page. Then we'll learn how to create our first PHP page. We'll talk about PHP code islands and the difference between HTML mode and PHP mode. And we'll talk about some variables and the query string and some basic operations. So let's get started. First, we'll learn the difference between static and dynamic pages. This is BYU Hawaii's basketball web page. And this is a static page. Everyone who visits this page will see the same page. How it works is, from your computer, you'll make a network connection to sports.byuh.edu, and you'll request this page, and you'll send that request over the network. The web server will see that request. It'll pull the men's basketball web page off of its hard drive and send that over the network back to your browser to display it. It just sends the file exactly how it's saved on the web server's hard drive. This right here is a dynamic page. This is in Canvas, where I've been hosting my course materials, and you can see this page has been customized for me. It has my name in here because I've logged in, and if I go to my courses right here to view all of the courses that I'm teaching, you can see that this has my courses and not, say, your courses. If you were to log into Canvas, you would see your courses instead. This page, how it works is, as I make the network connection to the web server goes to look at the file and notices that the file isn't a web page but a program. So it runs the program, and the program generates this web page on the fly. It puts my name in here, it puts my courses in here, and then we have that HTML page, and it sends it back to the browser, and it's been customized for me. Now the web server, after it sends the page over the network, it'll forget this page and so if I visit this page again, then it will have to regenerate it for me. But it's the program that runs every time. So that's the basic difference between a static and a dynamic page. Static pages are just a file that gets sent over the network. Dynamic pages are generated by a program. And so that's what we're going to be doing in this course, is writing programs to create these pages. Okay, so I have a text editor here, and I pasted in a basic HTML5 template. And I'm going to create my first PHP page here. So I'm going to give it a title, My First PHP Page, and a heading so that we have some content. My first PHP page. And now we can see this in the web browser right here. And now I want to make this page dynamic. I want to customize it for certain things. So I need to create this page using a program. So I'm going to use PHP, and the first thing that we need to do to be able to use PHP is just rename it from first.html to first.php. So now this is a PHP page, except where we have to load the first .php page in our web browser, and now we have our first PHP page, and it looks exactly like an HTML page. To start customizing it, we need to enter into PHP Mode. So to enter into PHP Mode, we do an HTML. It looks like an HTML tag, but it starts with a question mark and then has PHP after it. And now we're in PHP Mode. So when we're in PHP Mode, we can put some PHP code here, and we can do all of our programming. And then when we're outside of PHP Mode, we can put just HTML. So we can't mix this. We can't put HTML in here. If we put HTML in here, not only can we tell the colors are a lot different in my text editor, but when we look at this page, we just get an error. So we can't put HTML in PHP Mode, and we can put PHP in HTML mode if we want it there, but it probably isn't going to be the web page that we want. We probably don't want print hello right there. So when we're making these pages, make sure you need to make sure you know which mode you're in. Are you in your HTML mode, or are you in PHP mode? I like this text editor because the background color changes from a dark black to a more grayer black. Right here it's just a little clue to tell me which mode I'm in. So it's nice to have a text editor that does that, and it should also highlight or make things certain colors. That way if you see that it's the right color, then you know it works right. So this is the first PHP command, and I'm going to print some content out and even have some paragraph tags there. Okay, so if we refresh, then we see that we have that right there. And now let's look at the page source. If you notice right here, we just have this paragraph tag on the HTML page source. That's because on the web server it ran this PHP program. This print command said print out this content, so it printed out that into my HTML. But notice the PHP tags and the print command are all missing. So that's because the program ran and then we just got an HTML page. So whenever you view the page source, you can't see any PHP code, because the PHP code gets run and generates an HTML page. So you can't cheat off of other websites by viewing their page source and trying to find their PHP code. Most websites will hide their PHP code that generates the web pages, so that these hackers can't get into and figure out ways to break into their website. So we have to learn PHP. We just can't copy it from other sites, like we could copy some HTML tags. Okay, and this is your first command that we do, and a lot of times I, instead of using print, use echo. They're both the same, so print and echo are both the same, and there's no difference between them. Now this right here is a string. It starts with a double quote and ends with a double quote. Just so you know, if you miss the ending double quote, you can tell that it highlights stuff different. So you always got to make sure you begin and end strings with a double quote and with a double quote. Another thing you might have noticed is, hey, how come you put this inside of PHP mode? Isn't it easier just to put it here? And it certainly is a lot easier to put that there. And if you also noticed, I put these paragraph tags inside of the string as well, so you can certainly do that. It's most of the time it's easier to keep your tags outside of that, and then just put the information that you want to customize. So maybe I want whatever this content is, I want this to be customized, so that's what I'll print out there. But it's certainly fine to add tags inside of these strings if you want to, but you want to keep most of your HTML outside of PHP mode. But if you do need to put some HTML in, you can put it in the strings right there. So if I do want to customize this, I might need a variable, and hopefully from previous programming experience you remember what variables are, but they just store a value that can change. So this is a string variable, so it's going to hold a string. I can put whatever I want there, and then I can print this string out later on. So there's, it says high class right there. I can do other stuff with this variable. I can concatenate on another string. So this dot right there is called the concatenation operator. In other programming languages they usually use a plus, but in PHP it's a dot. So we can concatenate on a string, and now when we see that, we can see that this string has both part of these by concatenating it on. Another thing that we can do is just concatenate this on right there. So when we echo it out, we can kind of concatenate a bunch of strings together. And I'll use this a lot in the videos, so make sure you know what that means. It's just taking two strings and putting them together. So another thing with variables is they don't change their values unless they're on the right or left hand side of the equal sign right here. So my string over here is on the left side, so this actually changes the value of what it is, but on this side it's on the right side, so it doesn't change the value. And this doesn't change its value either. The only way to change their value is to put them on the left hand side of an equal sign. And just to show you what would happen, or show you one other thing that you can do, is you can surround these variables with strings like this, and we can add even more strings onto it, and then this just inserts this my string gets replaced with the value of my string right here. So you can, just like Perl, you can put these variables inside of strings to print them out too, and I'll do that quite often as well. So make sure you remember the concatenation, and that you can put variables inside of strings as you print them out right here, and that the variables only change values when they're on the left hand side of an equal sign. One other thing to note is if you notice, I'm using a variable that we haven't ever seen before. This variable has never been on the left hand side of an equal sign. So when we print it out, a lot of languages will give you an error, but PHP is a little different. It just assumes if nothing has been assigned to it, it'll just print you out nothing. So that's one thing to be aware of. It actually causes you a lot of pain and headaches later on, because you think that this has been assigned to something but it hasn't, so then it ends up being blank and it doesn't give you an error because maybe you misspelled it, forgot an E or something like that. So that if we forget an E and then we've never assigned something to this, then we get something blank when we're expecting it to be something like that. So those are string variables. Variables can also hold numbers. If we start it with a $, and we can add two numbers. just like this, and then we can print it out. And maybe even concatenate a tag on here, an ending paragraph tag, and put a beginning paragraph tag at the beginning, like that. And so we can see the 15, and if we view the page source right here, we can see that it's surrounded by paragraph tags. And then we have, since that's inside of this paragraph tag here, that's actually not valid HTML. So maybe we can put this as a span tag instead. And so then we can see that we have span tags around that. And of course, this is using the concatenation operator. If we want, we can take this out, and it does the same thing. A little shorter way of doing the same thing. So that's variables. As you can tell, my number changes here because it's on the left hand side of the equal sign. It starts off at 5, and then we take whatever it's in it, which is 5, add 10 to it, and we get 15, and then reassign this to be 15, so it changes my number. You should have seen this before if you've done programming before. Now there's a lot more that you can do with variables in PHP, just like any other programming language. So I'm assuming most people have programmed before and they have already seen a lot of stuff like this, and I won't spend a lot of time on it in these screencasts. If you feel like you need a refresher, go on the web and search for some other programming tutorials or screencasts that will give you a refresher on how you and more things that you can do with variables. However, we do need to talk about white space inside of PHP. If you've done HTML work before, you know that if we just put a bunch of blank lines in here, that doesn't affect the way that the page looks at all. Now we can look at the source and we can see the blank lines there, but HTML doesn't show any blank lines there. And another thing to note is in other programming languages, you use the \n to do a new line, and so we'll put that in there, and then we'll expect it to say, hi class, this is PHP on 2 separate lines, right? Well, the only thing we got is an extra space. If we view our page source, we actually do have a new line in the page source, but when HTML prints, when the browser displays the HTML, we don't get a new line. And so you should remember from your HTML class that to get a new line in HTML, we have to insert that tag right there. And just like other programming languages, PHP has white space doesn't matter, so we can tab this over, we can put these on separate lines. Besides, inside the double quote marks, we can do stuff like that, and it won't cause an error or anything. It's not a smart idea to do that because it makes your code pretty hard to read, and it's hard to understand what you're doing. So I don't recommend adding a lot of extra white space in there just for the fun of it, but you certainly can do it without causing any errors. Another thing that we should talk about are comments. There's multiple ways to comment, to insert comments into PHP. There are HTML comments that you can use, and you're certainly welcome to put comments in your HTML, but remember, these comments will show up in the source code. So you can see that showed up there. So you can always use HTML comments, But a better way to comment might be to use PHP comments, and you can start a comment with 2 forward slashes, and then type your comment. So we can have a PHP comment right there, and when we see that, notice that comment doesn't show up in the page source, so people that are looking in at your website won't see, looking at the source of your website won't be able to see that comment. It's just something here to help you explain what you're doing in your programming. So this is a single line comment. We can put comments at the end of statements. An end of statement comment. And you can have multiple line comments. So let's say that we're doing some debugging and then we want to don't want this stuff to happen. We can comment out some stuff and then it won't happen. So notice we didn't print out these 2 things, and now we just printed out our number. We still did this, but this gets commented out, so the PHP ignores all of that. So those are ways to comment, and I also think if you want to, you can use a # to comment. And that is another way to comment. So hopefully that covers comments and white space in PHP. Remember, if you want line breaks, you have to put in a line break there, or use separate paragraph tags, or put a heading tag in between them. Remember, the best way to think about PHP is you're writing a program to create a web page. You're not creating a web page. You're writing a program that will create a web page. And that way you can remember, well, if I want this web page to have a line break in there, I need to put in the line break tag that HTML needs. The last thing we'll discuss is getting input from users. Most times when you create a program, you either create a GUI that people can click on or type stuff in, or you have a terminal window where people can type in. You can ask them a question, they can type it in. So if you've done programming before, when you get input from users, that's the way you've done it. Well, since we're creating a web page, the way that we get input from users is by them filling out a form. So hopefully in your HTML class, you learned about HTML forms, and you learned that people can submit those forms, and then through PHP you can grab what they submitted and use that as input. We'll talk about forms later on in this class in another lecture, but to get us started with creating actual custom content, because everybody that visits this page is going to see the same thing, I'll show you a way that we can create custom comment and get input from the users through the query string. Now, one thing that I haven't mentioned yet is you can go into and out of PHP mode as often as you want. To go into it, you just have this tag. To go out, you have that tag. You do need an ending PHP tag, so you can't go into PHP mode and just finish your file, say like down here, and not include that ending tag. If we had that, we would get an error right there, because there's no ending PHP tag. But you can go into and out of PHP as many times as you want. So we'll start a new paragraph right here, and put in a new heading tag to explain what we're doing. And down here, if we want input from the user, usually they'll submit it through the form, but there's another way they can do it. So putting a question mark and then putting name equals Fred. And these are like variables. This is the name of a variable and this is its value. So you can just think of these as variables, and I put them in through the input, and then to be able to access them in our PHP code, we can go $_ name like that. And so we can echo this out. And we can do your name is. And let me concatenate that onto their name. And then put a exclamation mark at the end. So now we can see your name is Fred, and then they can put George can come to this website as well. Your name is George or Mary, and they can put their name there. Now what if you want more than one? What if you want their name and say their age? Well, you separate these with an ampersand sign, so age equals 25. So we could say the name is Mary and the age is 25. And notice it starts with a question mark, and then it's the variable name and its value, the variable name and its value. Now of course we wouldn't want users to have to type stuff up here like this in their address bar, but for now we can use this to customize the page. And now we can see the page has been customized for Mary. We're not printing out her age, but we can do that. And notice how I'm putting an HTML tag in a string right there. Remember that this is concatenation. And one thing that doesn't work with these is we can't do this anymore. So once we use the $_get and we have these brackets right here, we can no longer just put the variable inside of the inside of it. And notice we got this error. So you do have to end your string and then concatenate it back on. And then at the end, so we concatenate the name onto the end of this, and then one more concatenation to concatenate the exclamation mark and the line break. Okay, and we'll print out their age as well. So $_get age, because that's what's on the left hand side of the equal sign, and then concatenate on another exclamation mark right there. And notice in PHP you do have to have semicolons. It's okay if you miss the last semicolon in a PHP block, but you just out of habit I always put mine in, but in between statements you do need the semicolons. So now you can see the age is blank, so this is one thing that might drive you crazy. Well, why is it blank? We'll look up here and there's no age here, and they happen to misspell it and they put 2 G's in there and it still doesn't show up. And now you're like, how come it doesn't show up? Well, the thing to check is to make sure this is exactly the same as that. And now it shows up. And just to show you, this is case sensitive, so if they put a capital H there and then it doesn't show up again. So this needs to be exactly the same as that for it to work. And that about covers everything in this lecture. Hopefully after this video you can play around with it some more and have some fun.